Dr. Scott. You know what I realized during that intro is that I'm wearing the same sweatshirt that I worked out in. I didn't even change.
I'm wearing the same shirt that we did our live our walking tour last night.
I'm like, oh, I did my hair and my makeup, but I didn't even put
I didn't
regular
do
clothes
any of
on.
that. All I did was bump up the blur on my face, the touch up,
Okay,
the
okay.
StreamYard touch up button. I just kind of
Yeah.
there you go.
There you go. Yes. Happy Saturday. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Got another fantastic show for you guys today. We're in our summer book club era. Let's see. What do we got off the top?
What's off the top? Oh, amazing event last night. You found us. I don't know. You were the one who found us CLA in a day. A really great company run by our colleague Chris, who I can't even. There's just not enough great things to say about how wickedly talented this guy is. He knows
Very true.
everything about LA in so many different domains, and as a present to our Patreon members, we wanted to do 2 of these events. So we had summer, and they filled up last time we did them so quickly. So we did another leg of the Sunset Boulevard tour. He's got 2 legs, and that we did one couple of years ago.
Yeah,
and
that was Hollywood
Yeah.
Boulevard, and then this one, Sunset
And this
Strip.
is more the Sunset Strip, and it's it's supposed to be 2 hours. It ended up being 2.5 hours after a great round of cocktails and sushi at Volcano. We just had a blast. It was great. I mean, it took me. I was wrecked after a 16-hour day,
Oh,
so
yeah.
I didn't start moving today until about 10 a.m. But it was great, and all of our Patreon members that were there, it was just amazing. So thank you all for showing up.
Yes, so much fun. We will have another one coming up July 20th, which is a Sunday. So you and I don't have to put in a 12, 10, 16-hour day first. We
Right.
can wander out there on a Sunday evening. So if you are watching this live, or if you're watching this before July 20th, email us. You might still have a chance to RSVP. Not as of today, which this is June 21st, so a month before. Not all the spots are taken, and sometimes people end up dropping out last minute. So send us an email if you are hearing this, if you would like to join us. So we will let you know how it looks at that time, because he gave us a cap. We like to keep it at a certain number of people so it doesn't get too crazy and it still feels intimate. And yeah, please feel free to reach out and we'll let you know how it's looking. So with that, we have some new Patreon member shout outs to do since our last one. Yeah, do some effects there. Okay. At the associate level, we have Kaya L, Karen M, and Idolina. And then at the doctoral level, we skipped interns. Nobody wanted to be an intern for us this month around. That's okay.
I can completely understand that. And
we feel you. That's fine. Been there, done that. So at the doctoral level, we have Katie A, Megan B, and Kimberly J. So I have some swag to send out. I know I also need to do the monthly giveaway. So I will get on that and notify our winners. So every month we do a giveaway for a piece of merch or a little gift that Dr. Scott and I pick out. And those are for our doctoral level folks. They get entered into that giveaway every single month. So I will get on that because we got some new people and we have some months that have passed by, but we will get your swag out to you guys. All right. It's time.
Yes, it is time. So thank you, folks. We're so happy that we can have wonderful guests on Behind the Couch. And this is our second visit with Katherine, I believe, right, Shannon?
Yes.
Oh, right.
It
Okay.
is.
So this is the part of our show where we intentionally embarrass people with their incredible accomplishments. And this one is not going to disappoint. Katherine Schweit is an attorney and a retired FBI special agent who created and led the FBI's active shooter program after the tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School. She is the author of the FBI's seminal research on mass shootings entitled A Study of 160 Active Shooter Incidents in the United States between 2000 and 2013, and was part of the crisis team responding to shooting incidents at the Holocaust Memorial Museum, the Pentagon, and the Navy Yard in the Washington, D.C. area. She's also the author of Stop the Killing, How to End Mass Shooting Crisis, and is a sought-after world expert in mass shootings, incidents response, and crisis communications. This has been adapted into the award-winning podcast, Stop the Killing, which is an incredible project, along with her co-host and our dear friend, Sarah Ferris. Additionally, she authored a very important book, A Simple Guide to the Second Amendment, How to Talk About Guns with Anyone. And she also teaches a course on the Second Amendment for DePaul University College of Law. Welcome, Katherine.
Kate, got my signed copy right here.
It's very embarrassing. I see what you mean.
See, no problem. And today we're here to talk to you about yet another book. Where the heck do you find the time, lady?
Well, I mean, I think what I'm hearing right now is I can't really keep a job. That's what that sounds like.
Wow, look at that negative reframing, Kate. My goodness.
We're all overachievers. We're all
It'll be us in retirement.
We are. I know. I can't even imagine. But it's I love doing things, and I it's just I just kind of can't slow down. And there's so much out there to explore, which really is the new book that isn't about mass murders.
Yes.
I call it my fun book, but it is about dead people.
I know when you told us about it, you're like, I promise this one is fun. We were like, okay, great.
Even though it's about dead people, but it's an extraordinary story.
Well, I wanted to go back to one thing very quickly because it does sort of give an overview of the depth and the profundity of the work that you do. And it was incorporated into our introduction. Your seminal research on mass shootings, a study of 160 active shooter incidents in the United States between 2000 and 2013, which is pretty profound. I mean, like when I spoke that, I said it very quickly, but the reality is that this is a phenomenon and an ongoing challenge within our current society, Western world, that is not going away. I mean, hopefully at some point in future generations, we will get a handle on it, hopefully sooner. But thank you so much for being a part of that important information gathering and synthesis so that people can understand what's going on. Because I think that is like, if we were talking about the good place and all the points you get for whatever comes after this existence, I think you're really high up there. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. I do think it's very important. I continue to work on it. The FBI continues to release information every year. Right now, I just put a piece together for Police One, Police One publication, on a 25-year retrospective, so that we get a better look at what are the threats, to law enforcement. Are we making any progress? Where are we making progress? And I'm going to be putting together even more in the next 6 months. I actually have analysts working behind the scenes on the data for me.
Nice.
And that seems really important too, is that in the midst of all of this heavy material, it's got to be vital to recognize the movement that has been made instead of just focusing on everything that's going wrong. I don't mean to certainly not minimize the horror of it, but also focus on what information, the benefits from having all this information synthized.
Can I give you one piece of hopeful data? Hopeful information about that.
In this time, I will pay you. I'll buy you a drink. I need anything I can get me through the day right now.
Well, great. You don't know this, but Monday I'm flying to LA. So I might take you up on that.
Let's do it.
It's a plan. I am looking over the past 25 years of data on active shooter incidents, and the most remarkable piece of data that I have identified already is that we have almost halved our casualties from what we were dealing with before and around Columbine and Sandy Hook. We're about half, where we used to have about 7 on average. a year at every single incident. 7. We're down to 4 now. 4 casualties, whether they're death or injuries, are still terrible, but it's not 7. And it's consistent. It's been consistent for 5 years. Those numbers have been down. So I think that means civilians are doing a better job, law enforcement's doing a better job, and probably most importantly, we're beating the drum on prevention.
Yeah, I just listened to your new episode on Stop the Killing that looks at the report that just came out from the FBI. And yeah, it's just a little snapshot. And I love your cautious optimism that you come with it, in the episode, because it's really not that much time to look at, but they're good numbers to hear. So that's great. I'm going to pop that link to that in the chat.
Great.
Yes, please. Hey, but also, before we get any further, you just got back from Comic-Con, and this was our Shiloh
Crime
90
Con, not Comic
CrimeCon.
Con.
Sorry, not
I
Comic-Con.
did.
I want to go to Comic-Con. You just got back from CrimeCon UK. How was it? We didn't get to go this year.
We missed you. It was really fun. There were so many fun people there, familiar faces. That's part of what makes it really
The
fun.
best.
Familiar faces, you're walking around and you're seeing so many people who you know already. It was just such a great time. And I was there with Sarah Ferris, right,
Yes.
for on Podcast Row for all the things that we were doing. And then I took 30, they brought in Tring booksellers from UK, Tring UK, brought in 30 copies of my book, and they sold them the first day. So they didn't have any books to sell
Heck
the
yeah.
the
Nice.
next day.
Leave them wanting more. That's
It
awesome.
was great. It was very gratifying, and I signed a lot of books, and so it was nice. It was nice that it was a great time. We had so
Did
much
you guys
fun.
do a talk this year?
We didn't. Sarah was a little uncertain about her timing,
Sure.
and so of course we wanted to support her. And it's for listeners, it's not a secret. For your listeners, they may
Yep.
not know, but it's not a secret for our listeners that Sarah is dealing with metastatic breast cancer. She's actually, the day she arrived at CrimeCon, she got news that the meds were working, so she's pretty excited about that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and she's doing great. We're doing audio recordings for our season 5. We release our podcast by season, so we record them and then package them and release them. It's different type of format.
Excellent. Yeah. So
Well,
good to
and
hear.
Thank you for that news. Yeah.
Yeah, for
It's
sharing
good
that.
news.
Before we jump into the book, last time we had you on was with Sarah, and so we were talking about the podcast. I don't think we really got to get a lot about your origin story before, and I, being former law enforcement, and am always really interested in women's journeys into law enforcement. I think they're also different and also interesting, and we all have a different pathway. But I was wondering if you can give us a little bit about your time as an attorney, and then how did you decide to make the jump over to the FBI?
Yeah, I hadn't planned on it. I was working as an attorney in the Chicago prosecutor's office, which is the largest prosecutor's office in the United States. And it's a great job. I love doing it. I love Chicago. But I was also, I had grown up with a cousin who was an FBI agent. He's older than me, and he kind of toyed around with the idea. He's like, "Hey, you should apply. You should apply." And I was thinking of leaving the prosecutor's office, possibly looking around for jobs. And he said, "Just apply. They're always looking for lawyers. Just apply." So I really kind of applied because he nagged me about it a lot. I mean, that's the truth. So
There you go.
it was very embarrassing when 3 months later I got an offer from the FBI, and a few months after that I was at Quantico
Oh,
when
wow.
I learned how many other people this had been their lifelong dream, and then I was very embarrassed that I
Just
felt
kind of
like
did it on a whim.
I'd robbed the state. Right. You were one of
Oh, that.
40,000 applicants. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. And they're
Like my
brilliant
family
people.
member just won't stop nagging me. Geez, I guess I'll go to the FBI.
It's a terrible story, but I was thrilled to go. I had a great career. I loved it. 20 years. I mean, I left because I was mandatory. It was
Yep.
I had a great time.
I'm just
Yeah.
envisioning from Legally Blonde when Elle is in the shows. Oh, like it's hard?
Getting into Harvard Law.
Harvard. I'll just go to Harvard. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's
Well,
amazing.
maybe they had a down year or something. I don't know.
No, I mean, one of the things that I've always,
was great.
I have a relative as well who was in the FBI, and he was told from the beginning, he was told two things. They were like, they made a uh like the first day of training, they said they made a joke about the X-Files.
Mm.
And the instructor made a joke about the X-Files, and he said, and then he got serious and he said, "That's the only joke you're ever gonna hear from us, no more. Like, don't ever mention it. It's like it's just not it's an unwritten rule here. Just don't refer to it." Because there
Nice.
was so much built up about it, even over the decades that the show's been on. But the other thing was that they said, "You're gonna be meeting people that you're wondering, 'How did you get here? How did I get here?'"
Mm.
And that's what we're made of. We're made of a panoply of people from different backgrounds. We don't just want law enforcement. It doesn't hurt,
Right.
but we want people that see all different sorts of perspective, because a bigger perspective means more information coming in, which I think is really fascinating.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that I completely agree. The FBI, we always said the FBI hires from the population. You have to have, I mean, I had a third grade teacher from Philadelphia sit next to me,
Hmm.
and a pilot who had just returned from Desert Storm on the other side of me,
That's
all
awesome.
just alive.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So, I talk to cops a lot about their plan after retirement. Was writing something you were thinking about doing, or were you like, hey, I just need to jump into consulting and all this knowledge that I've built up and now putting that into the world in a different space? Did you have a plan for retirement?
I did. I had prior notice, right? I was mandatory, so I knew
Sure.
when I was going. And my plan was I'll work in the consulting field, which I still do, whether it's consulting for free, you know what that's like, or consulting for pay. But that I'll write on the side because writing is what I love to do. And I was a journalist as a young pup, and so I
Oh.
really I'm the rare person who actually likes to sit down at the keyboard and write. So that's thus the genesis of one book and then another book and then another. Every time I feel like I'm giving lectures to places, people are, you know, hiring me or bringing me in to talk about certain things, and I'm like, we should expand how many people can get this information, and that's what resulted in the simple guide to the Second Amendment.
So this is a great transition then. The full title of your book is Women Who Talk to the Dead: The True Story of 200 Forgotten Murder Victims and the Relentless Pursuit of Justice by an FBI agent and a Detroit police detective. So why did you make the decision to write about something different this time around? I mean, this is like sort of it is definitely like a branch off of your regular work. Can you tell us about that?
It is. It really is a situation where the uh, the information came to me. That people, I learned about this, and I really felt that over time, and when you hear kind of the story a little bit, this is kind of an homage to my homage to these law enforcement personnel, these in particular the women who decided to do this, who really persisted. They live on hope and persistence and perseverance, and they're working on these 200 plus cases when nobody else is
Mm.
working on them. Nobody else was ever going to work on them. They date back 70 years. In fact, these 200 cases are all murder cases,
Wow.
every one of them, cold case murders where the victim was buried without a name because they didn't know who it was,
Mm.
in a pauper's grave. And because of the different time span, and because this occurred in the city of Detroit, thus the T-shirt that I'm wearing today. Detroit, I'm a
Mm.
Detroit T-shirt. I can show you my Detroit T-shirt. Um, because the people were buried in paupers' graves prior to having any DNA pulled. First of all, we never did that for a long time, and then when the others did it, they didn't do it in Detroit. That's a critical piece of evidence that could be available now to solve a murder, but they didn't have any of it.
Yeah.
And the perseverance of these women is really the heart of this story. It's a really a love story of law enforcement never giving up.
So how did you first learn about this story, about the female investigators that are at the center of it all? How did that connection occur?
So the Detroit police detective Shannon Jones, I had never met. Actually, this goes way back. I wrote a couple of other books and other things in between. And first time that I heard about this was from the FBI agent, Leslie Larson.
Mm.
When Leslie was hired by the FBI as not an agent, as a clerk to collect confidential trash and put mail in mailboxes, she was hired as a 22-year-old into the Milwaukee FBI office where I was the acting terrorism supervisor.
Oh,
And I met her then.
okay. So she
Wow.
was just a clerk, just doing paperwork.
She was just a clerk. She wasn't
Wow.
even doing paperwork. She was like occasionally answering phones, and she was emptying trash cans. Right? She was right. She was getting her master's degree. She had just
Mhm.
finished her bachelor's degree. But unlike Leslie, right? Unlike my story, Leslie's origin story, which I go into in the book, Leslie's always wanted to be an FBI agent.
Mm.
Her whole set in life was to become an FBI agent and dig up dead people, which seems kind of like an interesting career choice when you're like 9.
Sure, sure. Most kids aren't pulling that out on career day.
Exactly. But she loved the aspect of archaeology. She thought about being an archaeologist. She says, maybe someday I still will be.
Very
But
cool.
she also was fascinated by the work that the FBI did. She was a fan of Silence of the Lambs, and she set about to create a path for herself to become an FBI agent, and then eventually took over what is the third busiest forensics team, ERT, in the FBI, which is the one that runs out of the city of Detroit.
No kidding. Wow, that's the third biggest. My
Mhm.
goodness.
They
I
have
Is
a
that
think you're
40-member team.
okay? Go ahead, Scott.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think that, what you're touching on is reflective of a certain type of personality, um, that gets drawn to that, and it's about the people. It's not only about putting pieces of a puzzle together, it is about archaeology. It's about
Mhm.
personal archaeology and societal archaeology, and my brief experience with it when I was lucky enough to go to the FBI and LAPD crime
Yeah.
library, basically, where they're trying to pull back all of these, like literally 100 years of investigations and boxes and evidence that's been spread all over the county of LA. And the two detectives that were working that unit, they were archiving, and I've never seen, and they said it's not only us, it's anybody that comes into this job. You are pulled to it for a reason, and then you get passionate about it. And like
Yes.
I just think that's so interesting. I'm sure some people it would never occur to be interested by this type of deep dives into the personal stories of these unnamed victims or these cold cases and dead ends. So I love that we're spreading light on it, and maybe this will help bring light to funding rape kits, if nothing else, those kind of things that are desperately needed across the US.
One of the challenges, I'd love to give you just a little backstory about how this whole situation in Detroit came about. But one of the challenges is that exhumations cost thousands of dollars for
Right.
Mm.
to dig up one body. So, if I could just tell you how these two connected up, because just
Please,
what you were
yeah.
saying about the personalities, I think these two ladies, Shannon and Leslie, they really have that connection to the victims, to the people in the cases, and they feel that's why they do the jobs they do. So Shannon Jones had been assigned at a point in her career. She's from Detroit and born and raised out in the suburbs and then with the Detroit Police Department. Shannon had been assigned to the missing persons desk. And she still is, the one person assigned to missing persons in Detroit, in the Detroit Police Department. And Shannon began to notice that sometimes, first of all, just what you were saying about LA, nothing electronic, paper files, no idea. So she found in their converted grocery store warehouse where files were being kept with all the other county files, that the police files included all of these cold case murders that not only, weren't being worked, but weren't digitized. And so there was no way to even search for them. So somebody would come to her and say, "Hey, I'm looking for my missing uncle." And well, when did your uncle go missing? Oh, 2005. And Shannon would go back to see if there was a report filed for 2005. And sometimes she would find that she didn't have a missing persons file, but she might have a murder case of an
Yeah.
unknown person, and they were beginning to dovetail.
Mm.
So it is a crazy, imagine visually what happens. Shannon begins to put missing person faces and files up on the partition next to her desk. And then she begins to put the people who are for these cold cases that are unidentified murder victims. And she tags the top on one side, "Where am I?" And she tags the
Mhm.
top on the other side, "Who am I?"
Oh,
And she starts
powerful.
matching.
Mm.
Yeah, she starts matching these cases up. And it's all about the people. Shannon keeps saying it's somebody's brother, mother, sister, son, person who disappeared. And that's really her motivation. And this was when I first learned about it about 6 years ago.
That's amazing. I mean, that's like
Yeah.
paper archaeology, right? Like you think
Right.
archaeology, like someone digging and using the little toothbrushes, but that's like what she's doing with these paper files that aren't talking to each other, and she's having to dig through
Yeah.
those.
And
That,
she's trying to decide how to do that. How do I do that? How do I find all these people and where?
so how does, kind of the birth of the curiosity with her and starting to do that work then lead to what is described as the FBI's largest exhumation project ever, and help us understand the scope of that.
Yeah, it is huge. So Shannon actually attended an exhumation that
Mhm.
Leslie's team conducted for the Michigan State Police. She saw that years ago when they dug up two caskets to identify. But the difference between exhumations that you hear about now, oftentimes, and what Shannon and Leslie decided to do is that usually when somebody says, we do the investigative work and somebody says, "Hey, I think that we can confirm that this person who was buried without a name, this particular person, uh, all the information in their autopsy file and the burial records indicate this was probably the person." Exhumations are done generally on court order to confirm that the
Mm,
person in the box is the person that they think it is. In this case, Shannon had seen a couple of exhumations, and one day she decides, which is kind of, I explain it in detail in the book, but she decides to come to Leslie and say, "Hey, I know that you did this one, but I'd like to do 200." Um, and Leslie says, after I think she takes her jaw off the floor,
yeah.
um, she says, "All right, let's figure out how to do it." And that's
Wow.
really what the book is about. The book is about telling the story of how Shannon and Leslie came up with this idea, who supported them, how they did it, how they funded it, and what turned into, because the FBI had never done anything like this before. But Leslie doesn't really have no in her vocabulary. And so she set about a plan to do something, probably not realizing, certainly, I'm sure she didn't realize at the time, that she would end up conducting the largest exhumation of bodies, murder victims ever by the FBI in its
Oh my
history.
gosh.
Its 100-plus-year history.
Yeah. I'm sure she had a lot of, background research to do and get some ideas going, and who was gonna help to take that all to kind of cross over that red tape that, they would have been like, "What? You wanna do what? I'm sorry. We
I
we don't
think
have
there was
those
a little bit of
resources."
that.
Yeah, yeah.
When I
So
when I
what
talked to Shannon, she was like,
Mhm.
"Yeah, I kinda told her this is what I wanted to do." And Leslie was like, "Yeah, I don't think she said it that way." It was like, "What?"
How funny.
It was pretty bad.
Yeah. So, I mean, over what period of time are we talking that
So
these women, once this got going, and if you want to add to just how maybe some of that, like logistically, how
sure.
did this come to fruition, and then what the time period was like?
So as I mentioned 6 years ago, I'm having a conversation with Leslie because she's a personal friend of mine. She lives in Detroit, I live in Virginia, but we're talking on the phone. We're talking through FBI. Every time she was frustrated about something at the office, she'd call and say, "Hey, how can I do this? Or what should I do about that?" And she starts to tell me, "Well, I'm trying to do this, but I'm having trouble getting funding and the lab I want to do." And the more she talks, the more I'm like, "You're doing what?
Mhm.
You're digging up, you want to dig up hundreds of bodies? Where? What? How are you going to do that?" So one of the things that, they decide is we'll do it over time. We'll do it in the summertime when the ground is dry enough in Michigan. So they schedule 3 digs, 3 week-long digs, 3 months in a row for 5 years. So it gave me an opportunity to go out there. And so I would be Detroit. I'm from Detroit. So it was great for me. I, drove home and I'd go out to the cemetery for the day while they were digging and spend the day out there watching them backhoes and
No
water
way.
bottles and what does it really take. So I wanted to give the readers something that they don't get. You hear the word exhumation a lot of times in stories, but you don't really know what that means. And I wanted the reader to have that inside baseball and know what it's like to have to dig a body out of the ground. What does it take to do that?
Yeah, and I'm sure there aren't a ton of months throughout the summer that they could do it, so there's, like, this waiting period then for the next year
Right.
to get I mean, I get it gives them time to, like, do the work and have the DNA tested, and that had to be just completely motivated once they start making those matches and getting those hits and
Yeah. So what's interesting is that, you know, um, as you can imagine, in all told, they pulled more than 200 DNA. They pulled more than 200 sets of bones
Mm,
to pull DNA. They do not have, spoiler alert, they do not have the results for all of those yet
sure.
because it takes time. It may take months for the lab to provide any lab to provide it. The FBI lab is doing some of the DNA testing. There are other services, unless, like you were saying about rape kits, right? Unless somebody's going to step forward and say, we want our independent lab will run all these tests.
Yeah.
Leslie has dozens and dozens of sets of bones, but she can only send 5 to the FBI every month.
Huh.
So,
And
okay,
these are from the paupers' graves, correct?
correct. They're
Alright.
all murder victims, and they're all people who were buried in paupers' graves, one after the other, buried around other people who were named, but maybe buried by the county because they didn't have any money for the burial.
Okay.
Um, and buried in probably not particularly desirable areas of the cemeteries in Wayne County on the western side of the city, western side of the county.
Yeah,
Wow.
we have a version of that here in Los Angeles that,
Every
that
city
is
does.
yeah, and I mean, especially being Los Angeles being so large, and one of the wonderful things that they do is they have a memorial service once a year that is open to the public where people
I
Yeah.
can
love
come
that.
and give their thoughts and prayers to these unnamed victims that might be either murder victims or they're people that were homeless or unhoused but unidentified, and
Yeah.
Mhm.
there's no one there to recognize their life. So I just love that this is the next step, is that some of us are recognizing these nameless folks, and then you guys are taking it the next step and trying to bring justice and recognition to them. That's such a wonderful circle there.
It really is. I love that idea of a ceremony. I should do that in Detroit. I should sponsor that and do that in Detroit. That would be
'Cause
amazing.
you don't have anything else to
I
do,
know, just yeah,
clearly,
like you don't
but
have enough on your plate.
we just added something else to your to-do list.
Well, let me tell you, when they decided to do this, um, they were kind of starting to do it and kind of coming up with ideas and hit and miss on whether it was working or not. At the same time, I was like, like a reporter trolling behind them, trying to get the story and thinking, oh, I want to, and I was interviewing them. So I would interview them and they'd be talking about this that worked and that didn't work and funding this and problems with that and the labs, this, that. And every time I spoke to them, I said, who else should I talk to? Who else should I talk to? And every name they came up with was a female.
Huh.
Thus the
Huh.
title of the book,
Right.
female prosecutor, female FBI agent, female Detroit detective, 5 female forensic anthropologists, females that had the Frost Center, which is in northern Michigan, and the Body Farm.
Right. Can you explain what the Frost Center is?
The Frost Center, if your listeners know what the Body Farm is,
You want to explain that just in case? I'm
Yeah.
sure a lot
sure,
do,
Lay
absolutely,
but
that out.
right.
yeah.
Yeah, but the Body Farm is not, that's not its real name. That's what everybody calls it. It's in
Right.
Tennessee. And it's where people who are becoming experts in forensics, where they need to dig up bones and identify, what is this bone, a dog bone, a bone from a dog or a bone from a human?
Mhm.
And what is the condition of this bone? And what can we see from the decay? And what can we see from the parasites that are on it? They learn all those things in Tennessee at this particular facility, where they use real human bodies that have been donated, to help teach scientists, people like Leslie, to learn how to properly dig up a body, carefully. You only get one shot, right? Now,
Wow.
and Leslie, in fact, teaches there in her spare time, which she has none of, but she seems to. And so the Frost Center is in northern Michigan in the Upper Peninsula. Frost, it's a forensics center that is like the Body Farm, only in fact, the bodies could be frozen in the ground. It's the only
Okay.
one like it in North America.
Wow.
So it's even a more sophisticated and more challenging way to preserve something that's buried underground and potentially frozen, and find a way to recover it. Because right when something is buried underground, as investigators, we're looking for every clue we can find, every nick that might be on the body, everything that might tell us around the body whether this person was murdered or it was an accident. And it takes a very skilled hand to pull those bodies out and to get the evidence at the same time. So that's the forensic anthropologist who came to Detroit to help them dig these bodies up. Very skilled hands.
Well, I can imagine just as soon as people start hearing what these women are doing, that it's like, how can we help, right? Like on
Yes.
board, it was probably just total snowball effect in that sense. I mean, it sounds like logistically, I mean, this is such a massive operation, all of these different entities coming together. Talk about collaboration. I mean, we have historically we have law enforcement agencies that don't even talk to each other sometimes.
Exactly.
This
Yeah, I
sounds
think
like amazing.
yeah, it's a great success story in terms of collaboration, um, but not just of law enforcement. Certainly,
Yeah,
when Shannon started working on the files, they kind of joke about Shannon does everything above ground and Leslie does everything below
I
ground.
love it.
So these are Shannon's files, but she would find that there was a Detroit, a victim, fished out of the Detroit River, and who was murdered, buried. But then, next to that victim, there was a file for somebody who had lived in Birmingham, or who had lived in Hamtramck, or who had lived in um, Dearborn Heights, towns outside of Detroit, but within the suburban area, and part of Wayne County. So Shannon, because she didn't have enough to do, decided she wasn't just going to protect and dig for DNA for Detroit police files. She was going to do it for every law enforcement agency that had a file in Wayne County. So she started working with all these other police departments to say, hey, we have a buried murder victim. Here's the file. Here's the 2 pages of faded paper that we know about it. Help us help you solve this murder and
Wow.
identify the victim. So she worked with all those departments, the Michigan State Police, but also something you don't see all the time. She worked with, eventually, the county excavators would bring excavators in to scrape off dirt. Then eventually the Detroit Energy Company, DTE, would come in, the telephone and energy company. They would come in, DTE would come in with their excavators. I was there one of the dig weeks when they had their excavators, who normally guys are normally putting up, utility poles,
They're like,
right?
what are we doing today? What's our mission?
I know. Yeah, and then people who were contributing water and food all week and supplies, there were, they're buckets from Home Depot, right?
Right.
That had all the supplies for every dig team that could be picked up and walked around. I mean, whatever. And I think that's a tribute to Shannon, that she felt that Detroit, during the time, these deaths went back 70 years. During
Mm.
that time, Detroit filed for bankruptcy, right? So they did not have any extra cash. And Shannon went to everybody and said, I want to create this miracle, help us do this. And everybody was very giving. They had lunch every day and porta potties and you name it.
What a story of community.
Very much so. And I think
That's
that nobody thought.
heartwarming, to know that when something like this that's so important, it can reach that wide of a section of the population and bring them together. I love that. I building on that, I guess Shiloh was letting me know that so far over 30 people have been identified. Can you share a couple of things? Can you share what that process was like for the investigators and the families? And is again, can you comment on what the latest developments in the science are? I mean, we talk about the body farm and
Yeah.
frost and stuff, but is there anything else that is information gathering or devices? Like what's out there that's driving this into the future?
Yeah, two things. I love that you asked me that question, Scott, because those questions, because first of all, they have, you hear 200, 220 bodies, and they only have 30 identified so far. Well, that's because it took them a couple of years to get their first DNA identification. But then what did that turn into? And this is what those 30 so far have turned into. Shannon Jones going to somebody's house and saying, your dad wasn't here when you were born because while your mom was pregnant with you, he was murdered.
Mm.
Oof.
And that young lady is in her 30s now.
Wow.
So she, bit by bit, is reconnecting, which is what we talked about in the beginning. This is the most important thing for the women working these cases. They're reconnecting family members and changing lives forever, forever by
Well,
reconnecting family members.
you think, I mean, that example you give right there is incredibly profound. Can you imagine being a person who has some calcified internal idea about what their father or what their parent or their sister was, that it could be my dad ran out on my mom, my dad
Mhm.
abandoned us, my sister abandoned us, my mother abandoned us, and
Right.
then to find out that, like, no, it was all of that I assumed for all this years, like, I mean, that's gotta be trauma in a good way, or it's the beginning of
Right.
a new path of healing to know
Mhm.
that it wasn't that you were abandoned, but that something terrible happened to your family member. What a gift. I mean, it's not a comfortable gift by any means, but,
You're
like, what
right.
a wonderful, wonderful gift.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I think you can't really, phrase it a different way. I think it's an incredible gift that the tenacity of these law enforcement officers who said, we we are not going to forget these victims.
Right.
These were dead files, dead bodies. Nobody was working on them for up to 70 years worth of files. Nobody. And Shannon and Leslie said, we are not going to give up. We're not going to, these families don't even know what
Yeah.
happened to their missing people. We're going to help them. No.
Can you
Yeah.
So
tell
there,
us a
Mm.
little bit about the emotional toll that they experienced? I mean, this is a lot. I mean, Shiloh and I are trained to do this, right? To
right.
give bad news or to be the holders and of grief and the holders of space. But how did they handle it?
I think a lot of this, Shannon is a very introspective person. She's super quiet. Well, they're both kind of quiet, and I think that's what they have in common. And I've spent a lot of time with her, with them. One day I was with them while they were going through files, trying to decide who to dig up,
Wow.
and and she had a box next to her desk, and she'd pull out a manila folder with a tattered piece of paper from the warehouse that was a file of a baby that died in the 60s, and somebody would say, well, this is what we know so far. I don't know if somebody's looking for that baby. And Shannon was sitting right next to me. I heard her say, no one's looking for any of these babies.
Mm.
And it wasn't, she was angry. She was
Mm.
angry. And that's what part of her motivation is. And understandably so. And at a certain point, she was like, stop, we have to turn. I can't do any more babies right now. Let's look at another decade. Is very hard. But I think that like Leslie has said, it took them a long time to even get their first identification. And I wrote about that in the book. And Leslie said, when Shannon calls me and she's got an identification, that makes it all worthwhile. All the work, all the hours. Leslie got married in the middle of this, kids, all the work is worth it, she says. And I think that probably they're a good balance for each other, because Leslie seems to be ever optimistic and was really born to dig up dead bodies. And Shannon it has a little cloud over her that motivates her. And both of them seem to be able to put it together. But it's been tough for them. And I think knowing that even now, Shannon probably has a decade left in her career, and she estimates she's going to spend the rest of her career working this and
Well, I
giving
think 30
identification.
is a phenomenal number. I mean, when you look at individual families, like 30 families you've brought some sort of closure
Right.
to, I mean, that's
Yeah.
absolutely remarkable. I mean, they are truly doing Lord's work over there.
No, I agree. And I think, I could have waited to write the book until I had every person's story, or a number of people. And there are people who their stories are in the book, but I wanted to tell the story of how this came about. I think that was a story that otherwise no one would have ever heard.
Well, getting it out there, and again, I'm so glad Shiloh brought that up. 30 is an incredible number given the enormity of this task, and also to you, getting it out there now is spreading the word, is informing people that this exists, and shedding light on it. You note that not every murder is going to be solved, but cases will be closed. And what is your perspective on how investigators reconcile the difference between justice and closure?
I think law enforcement, people who work in law enforcement, and I say as a former prosecutor, you just have to accept that. You have to accept that you can't solve every case. You certainly can never make a victim and a victim's family whole. So there's every justice is, I think in this case, their highest priority is to identify the person in the ground and reconnect them with their families. And then if they can solve the murder or resolve the murder, then they're good with it, right? That's a bonus in some ways. But I think justice is doing everything that can be done.
Yeah, for sure.
And there were times when I think that, lesser people would have walked away from this project. And that's another thing that I tried to convey in this story is in this tale, in this, however you want to say it. That's why the title is so long, because I thought no one is going to believe this is a true story. When I first started to work it, people would say to me, wow, this is a great story. I mean, no, it's true. They're like, it's true. Yeah, it's true. It's an amazing, true story of the best justice that can be provided to people who were completely just off the radar, completely forgotten forever. There's no reason why anybody would have ever gone back and gotten these files.
Well, I love the nuance of the question that you asked, Scott, because, we could talk to victims' families and say, what does justice look like? And what does closure look like from your perspective? And I think they would even, I mean, not wanting to speak for them, but I think a lot of people could say just the fact that someone gave a shit to open these back up and then all the work that went into it, like that is justice, not that it just sat in a dust-filled box, for the rest of the family's lives, really until no one was left.
Right.
Just that it doesn't have to be solved and all those things, but gosh. So this obviously is a remarkable story in so many ways, not just because of like the scale of it and there's the sciencey part, which is so cool. But I think for the leadership, and particularly when we're talking about leadership of women in law enforcement, in forensics, in the whole criminal justice system, um, what did that mean to you as a woman that has been in this career, what did that mean to sort of highlight that at the time? I mean, sure, when you heard the story, it's just so good, but how did you want to weave that into your book so that readers also took away how powerful this was?
I think that the women who are involved in this, and Scott, I realize I didn't answer one of your questions, so ask me about genetic genealogy.
Okay.
That's new forensics. But one of the things that um, I found a little bit surprising is all these women were working these cases, and I was the one who said to them, "Hey, how come it's woman prosecutor, women in the Frost Center, women at the body farm, women in Detroit, what's up with that?" And they all were like, "I don't know, you know, I didn't think about it." But I think when I pressed them about it, I have, I did. I think they recognize. I think Shannon and Leslie both recognize that they feel that they bring women can bring, which is a broad brush stroke here, but women can bring kind of a sixth sense.
Sure.
Leslie says she can walk onto a property and feel whether or not somebody's underground,
Mm,
and Shannon says she can do that. She said they rarely disagree on that, and she believes that that's because they have that, what some people call women's intuition, like
yeah.
that. And she didn't use that term, but that idea that they have that sixth sense, that they're just more attuned. And I think that's what astonished me about this story. And actually, I'm glad you asked me this, because I had somebody criticize me for using this title. They said, "Why are you highlighting the women part of it? Like, why are you
Oh,
making this about gender?"
that was their criticism?
Yeah,
What?
yeah.
I thought they were gonna say, like, "Is this about clairvoyance or, I see dead people?"
I know, it was kind of a kooky title, but
Oh
very
gosh.
truthful, because to them, Leslie, I mean, the title really comes from the fact that, of course, they were all women, but, Leslie says that she feels them talking to her from the ground.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that, to me, that's women who talk to the dead. Um, they are very much, when you see how they interact on ground, in the cemeteries, when they're talking, when they're holding bones, they're very connected to them, and they don't believe that, these are, these are people
Yeah.
in every sense of the word, and they address them properly and politely, and they want to help these people. Like, if they can't help them because they get a DNA result, it's going to be because somebody from the family hasn't contributed a DNA result.
Right.
So if you have somebody missing in Wayne County, Michigan, or any place else in the country, remember that if there isn't a DNA on file someplace for somebody in your family, they can't do it. They can't solve this.
So with that, can you talk about genetic genealogy?
I can. It's a perfect segue. Um, I am. No, I realized, Scott, I didn't answer that question, but Leslie, halfway through this, became a certified genetic genealogist, and it's a technique that allows you, think about DNA, and I explained in the book about kind of how the DNA aspect of it too, because I'm always about educating the reader and educating myself. And we think about DNA, and you have half of your parents, half your moms, and half your dads, and that's the simple math of it. And your siblings the same. And so if you have this DNA, you're going to be able to tell whether this is a relative, whether it's a grandfather up or down, whether it's a grandfather or a grandson. But genetic genealogy is a way of taking genetic identification from some person over here who's not related to some person over here. And because we know the concept of 6 degrees of separation, if you back the DNA up generation after generation after generation after generation, eventually you find the people who are related to each other. And in the process, you can find a true DNA match here today for somebody who you really don't have a match for.
Yeah.
It, it sounds a little Star Wars-ish, but it's science, as we say.
Yeah. Yeah. So cool. Such
There
neat
are
stuff
some,
that they're doing.
yeah, there are a couple of really fascinating cases in several different podcasts that are out there now about genetic genealogy and being so new of a science. And yet we're in a time where things are moving very, very quickly with the amount of data that is now available to us. That's
Yeah,
like exponentially higher amounts of data than we've ever had before. And it's to me, I think it's fascinating. You know, when I worked at the LAPD and I was chummy with a guy up on the 8th floor, like where they always, like they say, that's where all the nerds are, because it's the
right.
IT department and it's
Yep.
also all of the analysts. And the
Mhm.
analysts would do like he was their whole team was just amazing, but like they're just like the most normal people, but they are using data in the way that you're talking about putting together. It's like, oh no, I can tell you this guy they're looking for. I can tell you where he's been for the past 3 years. Like here are
Crazy.
his patterns. Here's where she goes on this weekend, and it's all about just synthesizing this data. The only thing that I don't know if you have any information on this, but it is big in the Senate hearings right now is with the bankruptcy and the sale of one of the biggest collectors of genetic
Mm,
information in the country.
yeah.
What is that going to mean? Because our data is supposed to be kept safe, and yet they're saying very openly that like it's safe, except we're going to sell it for marketing purposes. Like they're going to use it for something else completely. But it feels like um, we have a very dialectic relationship with what can be done with that information. You know, it's necessary. I mean, the way that it's going to be used to solve crimes is amazing, but yeah,
I
be
Yep.
think the
careful
people
about what
who,
you do with your data.
yeah, true, true. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I was in Michigan for a Missing in Michigan event. These are people who every day have family members who've been missing for days, weeks, months, years.
Yeah.
And it brings the real, and Shannon and Leslie go to those events. So do
Mhm.
the others, because it brings them to keeps them to the reality of we may be trying to identify these murder victims, but there are so many people still above ground that are looking for people who they're missing. And those people do provide DNA samples because they want just what you're saying about DNA collections here and there that might connect and identify people who don't know. Okay, we found this person, but we really don't know how to identify them in terms of their heritage, their genealogy. One of the people that Leslie identified through her genetic genealogy is there was a serial killer in Detroit and who had 11 victims. I believe it was 11 victims. One of them was buried unidentified.
Mm,
They were able to
wow.
identify the victim.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well,
so crazy.
I think, that's what we're going to leave to the listeners and to the readers of this are those personal stories of connection and cases. And that I know everyone's going to get into that as far as the meat and potatoes. And I've put links in the chat to the book. I will also put it in the show notes that end up on this.
Thank you.
Someone is going to snatch this book up and adapt it to a screenplay because I would watch the hell out of this show.
Oh,
Well, can I
This would
give
be
you a
amazing.
well, all right, two things. One, first, find somebody to do that. That'd be great.
Oh, I thought
You're
you were
in
gonna be
LA.
like, "Done, it's already done,
Oh
Shyla."
no, no. Reese Witherspoon, if you're listening.
Right?
Um, but I did want to say that this is an ongoing story. And
Yeah.
my intention is to continue to gather the information as they solve cases and identify people and where those people want their stories told. I'll try to do that, as we go along. It's going to be a time period, right?
Yeah.
And every story is worth its own story being told.
So this brings up a really, really important question then. Once you sell it to Reese,
Yeah.
who is gonna play you? Is it gonna be Reese herself playing you, or Cate Blanchett, or
Ooh,
Kate
Kate
Samantha
Blanchett.
Blanchett,
Mathis, or Claire
yes.
Danes? I think we
Well,
got 4 great choices.
well, I
All of them have
appreciate.
great hair just like you do, great
Great.
cheekbones. They're like you're gonna have your choice of people to play you.
Uh-huh,
Well,
uh-huh.
well, you'll have to. Yeah, I'm not holding my breath. And truthfully, uh, this is the obvious, right? But I'm so not the story. The
Mhm.
story is really those lovely, incredible, persistent women
Yeah.
who believe in this mission,
Yeah.
and they just wouldn't let it go, and they continue to fight it. So yeah, you go ahead and pop this into a movie. It'd be great.
Yeah. We'll figure out the rest of the casting for you
Okay.
soon here.
I kind of
Everybody,
like Kate Blanchett. That's a
I
nice
like that
idea.
too. I
Yeah,
really like that for you.
yeah.
Everyone, please go pick up this book. It's available on Amazon. Um, Kate,
And
thank you
everywhere you get your books,
everywhere you get your
e
books.
ebooks, audiobooks.
Thank
I think
you.
coming out next week.
Thank you for everything that you do. I'm also going to put your website into the chat because it's an endless resource. I actually just sent it to someone today who's working on an active shooter training, as far as really looking at the most up to date research, evidence based training. Um, Kate is not a gatekeeper here. She wants people to be educated. And we have used her resources before in our shows when we touch on things like active shooters and school shootings. So
I
thank you so much
appreciate it.
for all that work and for keeping that up to date. That's really important stuff. So please, everyone, go check out her website. There's a TED Talk on there. Stop the Killing podcast, just an incredible body of work that we have also utilized in the past, and so important today. But this is a fun one. Thank you so much for writing this book too,
Thank
and
you.
telling this story of these women and all of these women, and of course of the families. But we appreciate your time. Thanks for coming
Oh,
back.
thank you so much. This was so fun to talk about something I've been working on for so long. So I really
Yes.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Congratulations. You've
Thank
done
you.
it again. So thanks so much, Kate, and everyone else. We will see you next time on LA
Not so.
Confidential. Bye, guys.
Bye, folks.
Okay, we are backstage, I
Oh
think.
my
I've never
gosh, that
done
was
this like
so good.
ending
Did I
thing
go
here.
too long? Did I talk too much?
No. Oh my